It's September 18th, 1944 in eastern France, and Captain James Leach is sitting inside his M4 Sherman tank, watching through his periscope as something absolutely terrifying emerges from the morning fog about 800 yards ahead of him. He's a tank commander with the 4th Armored Division, part of General George Patton's 3rd Army, and what he's looking at through that narrow slit of armored glass is a German Panther tank, which is one of the most advanced and deadly fighting vehicles the Nazis have ever built. The Panther outweighs his Sherman by nearly 20 tons, carries a 75mm gun that can punch through American armor from over a mile away, and has frontal armor so thick that Leach's own 75mm gun can barely scratch it unless he gets incredibly close and hits it at exactly the right angle. Behind that first Panther, Leach can see more shapes moving through the fog, more German tanks rolling forward in a coordinated assault, and he knows that on paper, in every technical specification that matters, his Sherman is completely outclassed, and his crew should probably be dead within the next few minutes. But here's the thing that the German tank commanders rolling confidently toward the American positions don't know yet. The thing that's about to turn what they think will be an easy victory into one of the most shocking defeats in armored warfare history. American tank crews have learned something that no technical manual or engineering specification can teach. And over the next week of brutal fighting around a small French town called Harcourt, they're going to prove that superior technology doesn't always win battles when you're facing soldiers who refuse to fight by the rules everyone expects. The Germans are so confident about this upcoming engagement that their commanders have literally called it a turkey shoot, assuming that their newer, heavier, more powerful tanks will simply roll over the American armor and push Patton's advance back across France. They have good reason for this confidence because on paper, tank for tank, the German Panther is superior to the American Sherman in almost every measurable way, and the Germans are bringing hundreds of these advanced machines to the fight. But what's about to happen at Harcourt will shock the German high command so badly that they'll spend months trying to figure out how they lost over 280 tanks while the Americans lost only about 25 Shermans in the same battle. To understand how American tank crews pulled off one of the most lopsided armored victories of World War II, we need to go back a few weeks and see how they got to this place, and more importantly, we need to understand why the Sherman tank that everyone said was inferior turned out to be exactly what won the battle. It's late August 1944, and the war in Europe has reached a critical turning point after the successful D-Day landings in Normandy 2 months earlier. American, British, and Canadian forces have broken out of the beachhead and are racing across France, liberating towns and cities at a pace that nobody expected, pushing the German army back toward their own borders in what looks like the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. General George Patton's 3rd Army is leading this charge, moving so fast that they're outrunning their own supply lines. And at the spearhead of Patton's advance is the 4th Armored Division, which has earned a reputation as one of the most aggressive and effective armored units in the entire American military. These tankers have been fighting their way across France since the breakout from Normandy, engaging German forces in dozens of smaller battles, learning hard lessons about armored warfare with every engagement, and developing tactics that work for their equipment, rather than wishing they had different equipment. The Sherman tank that these American crews are fighting in has gotten a bad reputation among soldiers and historians, and in many ways that reputation is deserved because it's not the most powerful tank on the battlefield by any measure. It weighs about 33 tons, compared to the Panther's 50 tons. Its armor is thinner, its gun is less powerful, and it's taller than it should be, which makes it an easier target for enemy gunners to spot and hit. American tankers have given the Sherman some pretty grim nicknames that reflect their feelings about its vulnerabilities, calling it the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter company, whose slogan was "Lights first time, every time," because Shermans have a terrible tendency to burst into flames when hit by German anti-tank rounds. They also call it the Tommy Cooker for the same reason, and some crews have taken to welding extra armor plates onto their tanks using whatever scrap metal they can find, trying desperately to give themselves a better chance of surviving enemy fire. But here's what those technical specifications and grim nicknames don't tell you about the Sherman tank, and it's the thing that's going to matter most in the coming battle at Ericourt. The Sherman is reliable in ways that German tanks simply aren't. Starting up consistently in cold weather, when German engines are freezing and failing. Running for days without breaking down, while German tanks are constantly needing repairs and maintenance that can't be done in the field. The Sherman is also fast and maneuverable compared to the heavier German tanks, able to move quickly across terrain and change positions in ways that the massive Panthers and Tigers can't match without risking mechanical breakdowns. American tank crews can get spare parts delivered within days because the U.S. has a logistics system that actually works, while German tankers are often waiting weeks for replacement parts that may never arrive because Allied bombing has destroyed the factories and rail lines. Perhaps most importantly, American tankers are trained to fight as teams rather than as individual vehicles, using tactics that emphasize communication and coordination between multiple tanks working together to overcome the technical advantages that German armor might have in a one-on-one fight. While German tank doctrine often emphasizes the individual prowess of tank aces and the superiority of their equipment, American doctrine is built around the idea that 5 Shermans working together as a coordinated unit can defeat any single German tank, no matter how advanced it might be. By September 1944, the tank crews of the 4th Armored Division have had months of combat experience putting these tactics into practice, learning through trial and error exactly how to use their Sherman's advantages of speed, reliability, and numbers to overcome the Panthers' advantages in armor and firepower. They've learned to attack from multiple angles simultaneously, forcing German tanks to expose their weaker side and rear armor while trying to defend against threats from different directions. They've learned to use terrain intelligently, positioning their tanks on reverse slopes and behind cover where German gunners can't get clear shots at them, then popping up to fire and immediately moving to a new position before return fire can arrive. They've learned that while their 75mm guns can't penetrate Panther frontal armor at long range, they can absolutely destroy Panthers from the side or rear, and they can even punch through the front armor at close range if they're brave enough or desperate enough to get that close. The crews have also learned to trust their equipment, despite its reputation for vulnerability, because while Shermans do burn when hit, they're also much easier to escape from than German tanks, thanks to their superior hatches and escape routes, which means American crews who get hit often survive to fight again in a new tank, while German crews trapped in burning Panthers or Tigers often don't make it out. On September 18th, 1944, all of this experience and all of these hard-learned lessons are about to be put to the ultimate test, because the German High Command has decided that Patton's advance must be stopped before American forces reach the German border, and they're committing hundreds of tanks from the 5th Panzer Army to do exactly that. The German plan is straightforward and brutal. Use their superior armor and firepower to smash through the American lines around the town of Aricourt, destroy the 4th Armored Division, and cut off Patton's supply lines, forcing the entire Third Army to retreat back across France. German intelligence has told their commanders that the Americans in this sector are overextended, low on fuel and ammunition, and vulnerable to a concentrated armored assault, which is all technically true. What German intelligence hasn't told their commanders, because they don't know it yet, is that these particular American tankers have spent the last 3 months learning exactly how to kill Panthers, and they're not planning to retreat or surrender just because the Germans show up with superior technology. Captain James Leach and hundreds of other American tank commanders are positioned around Aricourt in defensive positions that they have carefully prepared over the previous days, using every trick they've learned about terrain and positioning to give themselves advantages that aren't listed in any technical manual. Comparing Sherman and Panther specifications, they know the Germans are coming. They know they're outnumbered. They know their tanks are technically inferior. And they absolutely don't care about any of that, because they've already proven to themselves that tactics and determination can beat technology. The German tank columns begin their attack in the early morning fog of September 18th, rolling forward with the confidence of soldiers who believe they have every advantage and can't possibly lose this fight. The Panther crews can see American tanks in the distance, and they're probably feeling a mixture of contempt and pity for the Sherman crews, who are about to face the full power of German armored warfare. What they can't see yet, what they won't understand until it's far too late, is that they're not driving into a turkey shoot at all. They're driving into a carefully prepared killing ground where American tank crews are waiting with tactics and positions specifically designed to turn the Panthers' technical advantages into fatal liabilities. And over the next week, these German tankers are going to learn an expensive lesson about the difference between having the best equipment and knowing how to win battles. The morning fog is still hanging over the fields around Aricourt when Captain James Leach gives the order to his gunner to fire at the lead Panther that's emerged from the mist. And even though he knows his 75mm shell probably won't penetrate the Panther's thick frontal armor from this distance, he's not trying to destroy the tank with this first shot. He's trying to make the German commander inside that Panther do something predictable, something that American tank doctrine has taught him to expect. And sure enough, the Panther does exactly what Leach hoped it would do. by turning its hull to presenting a better angle for its own more powerful gun to return fire. That turn exposes the Panther's thinner side armor for just a few seconds, and in those few seconds, 2 more Sherman tanks that Leach's crew has been coordinating with over the radio fire from completely different positions, their shells slamming into the Panther's exposed flanks from angles the German crew never saw coming. The Panther shudders from the impacts, smoke begins pouring from its engine compartment, and the crew bails out as flames start spreading inside their supposedly superior tank, running across the muddy field while American machine gun fire from the Shermans kicks up dirt around their feet. This is the pattern that's going to repeat itself hundreds of times over the next week of fighting around Aracourt. And it's the pattern that German tank commanders simply aren't prepared for, because their entire tactical doctrine is built around the assumption that superior armor and firepower will win engagements, not realizing that the Americans have developed a completely different approach that treats individual tank superiority as irrelevant compared to coordinated team tactics. The Germans keep expecting the Shermans to retreat when faced with Panthers, to fall back and avoid direct confrontation with superior German armor. But instead, the American tanks keep attacking from multiple directions simultaneously, using speed and communication to create situations where German technical advantages become meaningless. September 19th dawns with thick fog covering the battlefield again, and German commanders see this as an advantage because the reduced visibility should allow their Panthers to get closer to American positions before being engaged, negating some of the tactical disadvantages they experienced yesterday. What they don't realize is that the American tank crews have spent the night repositioning to new defensive positions, setting up overlapping fields of fire that will channel German armor into pre-planned killing zones. And they've got forward observers hidden in the fog who are radioing back exact positions of approaching German tanks to the Sherman crews waiting in ambush. The German attack that morning runs straight into this prepared defense, with Panthers advancing confidently through the fog only to find themselves suddenly taking fire from 3 or 4 different Shermans at once, each one positioned to hit the German tanks from angles where their armor is weakest. German crews who survived these coordinated ambushes report back to their commanders that they're not fighting individual American tanks, but rather coordinated hunter teams that seem to know exactly where German armor is going to be before it even gets there, which is absolutely true because American reconnaissance and communication is giving Sherman crews information advantages that offset the Panthers' technological superiority. By the afternoon of September 19th, the German 5th Panzer Army has lost over 40 tanks around Aracourt, and German commanders are starting to realize that something is going very wrong with their supposedly easy turkey shoot. The Panthers are supposed to be dominating this battle, using their superior guns and armor to destroy Shermans from safe distances, but instead they keep getting hit from the sides and rear by American tanks that appear out of nowhere, fire a few devastating shots, and then disappear before German gunners can get a clear shot at them. The American 4th Armored Division is losing tanks too, because this is still a battle, and German guns are still deadly, but they're losing them at a ratio that shocks the German command. For every Sherman that gets knocked out, The Americans are destroying 3 or 4 Panthers, and even when Shermans do get hit, their crews are often able to escape and get issued a replacement tank within a day or two, while German crews trapped in burning Panthers are dying or getting captured, and German replacement tanks are stuck hundreds of miles away because Allied aircraft have destroyed the rail lines that would bring them forward. On September 20th, the weather clears, and German commanders think this might finally give them the advantage they've been looking for, because clear skies mean their tank gunners can see targets at longer ranges where the Panther's superior gun should dominate the battlefield. But clear skies also mean that American fighter bombers can see the German tank columns, and suddenly the battle becomes three-dimensional as P-47 Thunderbolts scream down from above, their rockets and bombs turning German armor into flaming wreckage before the tanks can even engage the Shermans on the ground. The American tankers have learned to coordinate with their own air support in ways that German forces simply can't match anymore, because the Luftwaffe barely exists at this point in the war. And German tank crews now have to worry not just about Shermans attacking from multiple angles on the ground, but also American aircraft attacking from above, creating a situation where German technological advantages in armor and guns become irrelevant because they're being destroyed before they can even use those advantages. Captain Leach and his crew spend September 20th hunting Panthers across the fields around Aracourt, using tactics that they've refined through 3 months of combat experience. They move fast, using the Sherman's superior mobility to race from one firing position to another, never staying in one place long enough for German gunners to draw a bead on them. They communicate constantly over the radio with other Sherman crews, sharing information about German positions and coordinating attacks so that Panthers are always facing threats from multiple directions simultaneously. When they do encounter a Panther in a situation where the German tank has the advantage, Leach doesn't try to fight a battle his Sherman can't win. Instead, he retreats to a better position, calls in other tanks to help, and waits for the right moment to attack from an angle where American guns can penetrate German armor. This is what American tank doctrine has been teaching for months now. The idea that winning individual tank duels doesn't matter nearly as much as winning the overall battle. And if that means running away from a fight you can't win so you can come back with help and win a fight on your terms, then that's exactly what you should do. German tank commanders are trained in a completely different philosophy that emphasizes individual tank prowess and the inherent superiority of German equipment. And this philosophy is getting their crews killed at an alarming rate around Aracourt because they keep trying to win battles through direct confrontation and firepower, which works fine when you're fighting an enemy who plays by the same rules but fails catastrophically when you're fighting an enemy who refuses to engage on your terms. By September 22nd, the German offensive has completely stalled, with over 100 Panthers and other German tanks destroyed or abandoned around Aracourt, while the American 4th Armored Division has lost maybe 15 Shermans total. German commanders are sending increasingly frantic messages back to higher headquarters, trying to explain how their supposedly superior armor is getting destroyed by inferior American tanks. And the answers they're getting back aren't helpful because German doctrine doesn't have a solution for this problem. The Panther is still the better tank on paper, with better armor and a better gun. But those technical advantages aren't translating into battlefield success, because the Americans have figured out how to make them irrelevant through superior tactics, better coordination, more reliable logistics, and air support that German forces simply can't match. German tankers are brave and well-trained, but bravery and training can't overcome a situation where you're being attacked from 3 directions at once by tanks you can't see, while aircraft are bombing you from above, and your own reinforcements are stuck miles away because the roads and rail lines have been destroyed. On September 23rd, German commanders make one final desperate push to break through American lines at Ericourt, committing their last reserve of armor in a massive attack that they hope will overwhelm the defenders through sheer weight of numbers. Over 60 German tanks, including both Panthers and older Panzer I-4s, attack American positions in a coordinated assault that represents the last major effort to salvage the operation. Captain Leach and hundreds of other American tank commanders watch this German assault develop through their periscopes and gun sights. Seeing the massive formation of enemy armor rolling toward them across open fields, and instead of feeling fear or panic at being outnumbered, they feel something closer to grim satisfaction because the Germans have just made a terrible tactical mistake by concentrating all their remaining armor in one place where American tanks and aircraft can engage them simultaneously. The Sherman crews open fire from prepared positions, their 75mm guns slamming shells into the flanks of German tanks that are so focused on attacking forward that they don't realize they're being engaged from the sides until it's too late. American artillery joins in, dropping high explosive shells into the mass of German armor, and P-47s dive from above with rockets that turn Panthers into burning hulks. The German attack dissolves into chaos as tanks start exploding and burning across the battlefield, crews bailing out and running for their lives, and the coordinated assault becomes a panicked retreat. By the end of September 23rd, the German 5th Panzer Army has lost over 200 tanks around Ericourt, and the offensive that was supposed to push Patton back across France has instead become one of the most catastrophic defeats in German armored warfare history. The Americans have lost approximately 25 Shermans over the same period, creating a kill ratio of nearly 8-1 in favor of the supposedly inferior American tanks, and German commanders are left trying to explain to their superiors how this disaster happened. The battle continues for a few more days with smaller engagements as German forces try to disengage and retreat, but the outcome is already decided. American tank crews have proven something that's going to echo through the rest of the war and into military thinking for decades afterward. Superior technology doesn't guarantee victory when you're facing an enemy who has superior tactics, better logistics, more reliable equipment, and the flexibility to adapt their fighting style to overcome your technological advantages. Captain Leach survives the battle and continues fighting with the 4th Armored Division through the rest of the war, eventually making it all the way to Germany itself, and he carries with him the lessons learned at Ericourt about how coordination and tactics can overcome technical disadvantages. His Sherman tank, which so many people dismissed as inferior to German armor, proved itself to be exactly the right tool for the job when used by crews who understood its strengths and weaknesses and developed tactics specifically designed to maximize those strengths while minimizing those weaknesses. The Germans thought they were bringing superior technology to a turkey shoot, but what they actually brought was expensive, over-engineered armor to a battlefield where speed, reliability, logistics, and tactical flexibility mattered more than having the thickest armor or the most powerful gun. The American tankers at Aracourt didn't win because they had better equipment. They won because they had better tactics, better coordination, better logistics, and the willingness to fight smart rather than fighting proud. And that combination proved to be absolutely devastating to an enemy who put all their faith in technological superiority. When the smoke finally clears over Aracourt in late September 1944, German commanders are left staring at a battlefield littered with the burned-out hulks of over 280 tanks and armored vehicles, trying to explain to their superiors how an offensive that was supposed to be a turkey shoot turned into one of the worst armored defeats in German military history. The 5th Panzer Army, which had been assembled specifically to stop Patton's advance and push American forces back across France, no longer exists as an effective fighting force, with entire tank battalions reduced to scattered remnants of survivors who managed to escape the killing fields around this small French town. The American 4th Armored Division, which German intelligence had assessed as overextended and vulnerable, is still firmly in control of Aracourt and the surrounding territory, having lost only about 25 Sherman tanks in exchange for destroying 10 times that number of German armored vehicles. The kill ratio is so lopsided that when the initial reports reach German high command, some officers refuse to believe them and demand verification, because these numbers suggest that American tanks somehow outfought German armor so decisively that it calls into question everything German doctrine teaches about armored warfare and technological superiority. General George Patton visits the 4th Armored Division shortly after the battle ends, walking among the Sherman tanks and talking with crews who are already making repairs and preparing to continue the advance toward Germany. He understands immediately what his tankers have accomplished at Aracourt, not just in terms of destroying German armor, but in proving something much more important about how modern armored warfare should be fought, and he makes sure that the lessons learned here are spread throughout the entire Third Army so other units can adopt the same tactics. The Germans, meanwhile, are conducting their own analysis of what went wrong at Aracourt, and the conclusions they reach are deeply troubling for their military leadership. German after-action reports acknowledge that American tank crews demonstrated superior tactical coordination, better use of terrain, more effective integration of air support, and logistics that allowed them to maintain combat effectiveness even while advancing rapidly across France, while German forces were struggling with fuel shortages, broken supply lines, and equipment that broke down far too often. Some German tank commanders who survived the battle report that they felt like they were fighting not against individual American tanks, but against a coordinated system that seemed to know where German armor would be before it got there, that always had multiple tanks positioned to attack from different angles, and that could replace destroyed Shermans faster than the Germans could replace destroyed Panthers. This realization is particularly painful for German officers who have spent years believing that German engineering and German tactical doctrine were superior to anything the Allies could field. The technical specifications of the Panther tank haven't changed, and on paper it's still superior to the Sherman in armor protection and firepower. But Harcourt has proven definitively that those specifications don't determine the outcome of battles when the side with supposedly inferior equipment has better tactics, better training, better logistics, and better coordination. American tankers learned to fight smart instead of fighting proud, using every advantage they had while avoiding direct confrontations where German technological superiority might have mattered. Captain James Leach and thousands of other American tank commanders continue pushing east after Harcourt, carrying the lessons they learned into every subsequent engagement with German armor. They know now, with absolute certainty, that their Shermans can beat Panthers and even the massive Tiger tanks if they use proper tactics, maintain coordination with other friendly tanks, and leverage their advantages in speed, reliability, and numbers rather than trying to win the kind of head-to-head slugging matches that German doctrine prefers. The Sherman tank's reputation begins to shift among American crews after Harcourt, and while they still acknowledge its vulnerabilities and still weld extra armor onto their tanks whenever they can find scrap metal, they also develop a grudging respect for what the Sherman can accomplish in the hands of well-trained crews who understand how to use it properly. The grim nicknames like Ronson and Tommy Cooker don't disappear, but they're balanced now by a recognition that the Sherman won the biggest tank battle of 1944 against supposedly superior German armor, and it did so decisively. By November 1944, American armored doctrine has fully incorporated the lessons from Harcourt into training and tactical manuals, emphasizing coordinated team tactics over individual tank prowess, teaching crews to attack from multiple angles simultaneously, stressing the importance of communication and coordination, and drilling into tankers that avoiding direct confrontations with superior enemy armor isn't cowardice, but smart tactics. These lessons will serve American tank crews well through the rest of the war, including during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, when German armor makes one final desperate attempt to break through Allied lines. The Battle of Harcourt has strategic implications that extend far beyond the immediate tactical victory, because the destruction of the 5th Panzer Army means that German forces in France no longer have the armored reserves necessary to mount effective counteroffensives against Patton's advance. The Germans will continue fighting fierce defensive battles as American forces push towards the German border, but they'll never again be able to assemble the kind of concentrated armored force they brought to Harcourt. And this means Patton's Third Army can maintain its aggressive advance with less risk of being stopped by German counterattacks. For the German military, Harcourt represents a turning point in their understanding of armored warfare, forcing them to acknowledge that the technological superiority they relied on throughout the early years of the war is no longer enough to guarantee victory when facing enemies who have learned to overcome that superiority through better tactics and logistics. German tank commanders who survive encounters with American armor after Harcourt approach battles with much more caution and respect for their opponents, no longer assuming that a Panther can simply drive forward and dominate Shermans through pure technical superiority. The French town of Harcourt itself, which found itself at the center of this massive armored clash through no choice of its own, gradually recovers from the battle over the following months and years. The burned-out tank hulks are eventually cleared away, the damage to buildings is repaired, and life returns to something resembling normal. Though the townspeople who lived through those violent days in September 1944 never forget the sight of hundreds of tanks fighting across the fields and through the streets around their homes. Historians and military analysts spend decades after the war studying the Battle of Harcourt, trying to understand exactly what factors contributed to such a lopsided American victory. And the conclusions they reach continue to influence military thinking about armored warfare into the modern era. The battle becomes a case study in how well-trained forces using coordinated tactics can overcome enemies with superior technology, how logistics and maintenance matter as much as firepower and armor in extended campaigns, and how adapting your tactics to leverage your equipment's strengths while compensating for its weaknesses is more important than simply having the best equipment on paper. The Sherman tank itself continues serving with American forces through the end of World War II and beyond, eventually being used in the Korean War, and even serving with various Allied armies for decades after that. And while it never escapes its reputation for vulnerability to enemy fire, it also earns recognition as one of the most important and effective armored vehicles of the war, precisely because it was reliable, maintainable, and available in the massive numbers that modern warfare demanded. The Germans built technically superior individual tanks, but they couldn't build them fast enough or keep them running consistently enough to win armored battles against an enemy who had thousands of Shermans ready to replace every one that got knocked out. Captain Leach survives the war and eventually returns to civilian life, carrying with him memories of that week in September 1944, when he and his fellow tankers proved that determination, tactics, and coordination could overcome any technical disadvantage. He rarely talks about the battle in later years, like many veterans who experienced combat, but when he does discuss Harcourt, he emphasizes that the victory wasn't about individual heroism or technological superiority, but about American tank crews fighting as coordinated teams and trusting in tactics that leveraged their strengths while avoiding direct confrontations where German advantages might have mattered. The legacy of Harcourt lives on in modern American armored doctrine, which continues to emphasize many of the same principles that won the battle in 1944. Modern tank crews are still taught to fight as coordinated units rather than as individual vehicles, to use terrain and positioning to create tactical advantages, to maintain constant communication with friendly forces, and to leverage combined arms integration by working closely with infantry, artillery, and air support rather than trying to win battles through tank versus tank duels alone. When military historians rank the most important armored battles of World War II, Harcourt doesn't always get the attention it deserves compared to more famous engagements like the Battle of Kursk on the Eastern Front or the tank battles in North Africa. But military professionals who study armored warfare recognize Harcourt as a watershed moment that demonstrated conclusively how modern armored combat should be conducted. The battle showed that winning tank engagements isn't about having the thickest armor or the most powerful gun. It's about having better tactics, better coordination, better logistics, and the flexibility to adapt your fighting style to overcome whatever advantages your enemy might have. The Germans come to Aracourt expecting a turkey shoot, confident that their superior Panthers would simply roll over inferior American Shermans through pure technological dominance. And they left having learned an expensive lesson about the difference between winning individual tank duels and winning armored battles. American tankers came to Aracourt knowing their Shermans were outgunned and under-armored compared to German tanks. And they left having proven that none of that mattered when you had better tactics, better teamwork, and the determination to fight smart rather than fighting proud. In the end, the Battle of Aracourt stands as a testament to something that military forces throughout history have had to learn and relearn. Superior technology alone doesn't win wars or battles. What wins battles is the combination of adequate equipment, superior tactics, better training, reliable logistics, and soldiers who understand how to use what they have, rather than wishing they had something else. The American tankers at Aracourt had all of those things, and they used them to destroy a German armored force that should have won on paper, but lost catastrophically in reality, proving once and for all that the Sherman tank in the hands of well-trained American crews was exactly good enough to win the war.